Welcome back to the Calculated Risk Podcast. I am Tyler Shoemaker, joined as always by Kelley Ford. Week 12 is here. Literally, we've got this week and next week the last full slates of the season before we get into conference championships and then the postseason, which we'll be here for. No worries. We will be around for bowl season. But Kelley, week 12, we say there's no disappointing slates. This one, is kind of the appetizer setting up for what's going to be a crazy week 13, definitely.
Yeah, I have to be careful because I don't want to be the kind of inverse of the boy who cried wolf, because if you cry wolf every single week, it loses its meaning. So I can't say every single week is just a banger of college football slates. It's not in reality. We get excited about it because we only get so many of them, and that's true every single week. But the reality is some weeks have kind of more meat on the bone in terms of the top end matchups. This week has a couple, and we're going to talk about them, but it doesn't have the depth of games at the top that a lot of other weeks do. And it does make sense when you think about what next week is, being the traditional rivalry week. And we do have some rivalry games this week. I mean, you got USC, UCLA, among others, but next week's really the week that teams go all out against their rivals in most cases. So it does make sense that if it's possible to schedule a lesser opponent or a little bit less of a high profile game, it makes sense why you would do that the week before rivalry week. So I'm excited because it's college football. And again, you mentioned it, we only have a couple left and it's over before we know it every single year. But I can't say with a straight face that this is one of the quote unquote best or most appealing weeks going in. But Tyler, as I've said before, it's weeks like this historically that have yielded some of the most chaotic weekends and biggest upsets that we've seen in any given college football season.
Yeah, and I was about to say, this week does feel like we could get a little bit of chaos because, you can be on Twitter for 5 minutes and see someone putting out their hypothetical, well, what if Washington goes undefeated and Florida State goes undefeated? And that's not a given by any means. And as a matter of fact, we'll use that as a segue here into our first marquee matchup. Washington going to Corvallis to Oregon State. Washington is my number 14 power rated team. Oregon State number 17. I actually project this game, Oregon State, as a half-point favorite. I think Washington opened as a slight favorite. That line has been pushed to Oregon State -2.5 with an over-under of 63.5. And I actually project this total at about 58.5. So I'm quite a bit lower on the total. But in terms of how these teams stack up, Washington still with a top 10 offense, number 7 by my numbers, with the number 40 defense. So got some work to do. I mean, they gave up 28 points to Utah, which I think it was Ari Wasserman tweeted, giving up 28 to Utah is like giving up 50 to another good team with the way Utah's offense is set up. So, but Oregon State's offense, number 14, so pretty good unit, and their defense, number 35 in my numbers. And then in terms of these teams' resumes, I've got Washington number 4. So I know there was some consternation about the CFP rankings and Washington still sitting at number 5. I actually do have them in the top 4, sitting there at number 4. Oregon State, number 18 resume ranked for me right now, Kelley.
Yeah, Tyler, this game, it's got a watchability score of 9.3 for me. I mentioned we have a couple big high-profile ones. This is one of them. It's the number 2 game of the week for me, a top 25 game of the entire regular season by this metric. Anytime you have a top 5 CFP ranked team as an underdog, it's going to be a good game. I'm very excited for this one. I do believe Washington should be on high alert. I'm not quite as confident, though, in Oregon State as Vegas, or even to a lesser extent, your numbers, Tyler. I make Washington a 2-point favorite here on the road in Corvallis, a 56% win expectancy for the Huskies. Washington's having an outstanding season, obviously. They're my number 6 overachiever to date. I've had them in the top 4 of my most deserving rankings for 5 consecutive weeks now. But Tyler, from a power rating standpoint, we've talked about this on the Monday show every single week. My model isn't sold on Washington. Their best power rating rank of the year so far is number 8. And I currently have Washington power rated number 13. So Washington, they're great on offense. They have a very good resume. They're great on offense. They have been all year. They started at number 7. They rose to as high as number 1 for 1 week in mid-October. Now they've kind of settled into that number 4 spot for this past month. The big question all year has been, and really continues to be, and you touched on this, Tyler, just how good is the Washington defense. This is a unit that started the year number 50 in my preseason projections. They quickly moved into the top 25 with a hot start, but 3 straight weeks of regression now has seen this unit fall to number 43. That's only the 5th best in this conference as things stand right now. It will be a huge test this week for the Husky defense against the number 11 Oregon State offense. Tyler, Oregon State started the year number 24 in my power ratings. They've been between that and number 18 all year. This defense has been exactly what I expected. They started the year number 26. They're now 27, but it's the offense. I said it's going to be a big test for that Husky defense. The offense has been a really pleasant surprise. They're number 11. It's the best Oregon State offense we've seen this year, and we've seen in a really long time in Corvallis. But the secret's out, man. Vegas makes them a favorite. You make them a favorite. Lots of other people out there are making them a favorite. Honestly, Tyler, I would really like their chances to win this game more, the Beavers, that is, if they were an underdog. Washington, they're going to be a favorite to make the Pac-12 championship game, even with a loss here. But this team's already on the outside of the committee's top 4 looking in. They've got a chip on their shoulder. And now you're telling them, hey, you're an underdog in this game, by the way, by Vegas. Like, how many times can we disrespect Washington? And I'm part of the problem because I've got them power rated number 13, right? But my deserving rankings telling them, no, like, don't get mad at me. I've got you in the top 4. The committee doesn't. They're mad about that. Now Vegas says, we actually think Oregon State's going to win the game, guys. Ooh, I don't like just how that's all coming together from an Oregon State perspective. So bottom line, I got Washington -2. It's a 56% chance that they book their spot in Las Vegas right here, right now with a win, and they roll into the final Apple Cup, at least for now. We don't have any future ones scheduled, but we do have an agreement in place, which I'm happy about, to continue playing this game. 56% chance they roll into that game undefeated.
Yeah, and one note from a betting perspective, and this is not something that I necessarily take as gospel or anything. It is just interesting to look at, but I just took a look at the VSiN.com betting splits for this game. 81% of the bets right now are on Washington +2.5. So take that for what it's worth. I'm not saying one way or another. Generally, you get a line like this on a team like Oregon State, as a favorite. Again, they're a bigger favorite in Vegas than they are even by my numbers. With heavy action on the other side, the Beavs might get it done here. We'll see. I'm definitely curious when I see those type of betting splits, and then I see kind of the disagreement in the numbers like you and I have. That makes me even more curious. It makes me anticipate this game even more.
So that means the Sharps. That means the Sharps are on Oregon State, then, right, Tyler? If you've got 81% of the public on Washington, right? And that's why the line is where it is.
Yeah. So VSiN, which is DraftKings numbers, are reporting 81% of the bets are on Washington, but 51% of the money on Oregon State. And the more important thing, just in my experience, the more important thing to look at is the line movement. The line movement's going to tell all. And like I said, Washington, I think, did open as a slight favorite. I think maybe
2.5
point favorite.
2.5 points, I think. Washington opened 2.5.
Yep. Oh, wow, they opened 2.5. Okay, so yeah, so it's moved. You see that move through 0 like that. That's definitely get your antennas up for sure. So again, not saying it's definite one way or another, but it is an interesting note to look at. Anything else in this game, Kelly, before we move on?
No, sorry, I just jumped in there trying to get the clarification. I'm all good.
No, you're good. I didn't want to cut you off. Our next marquee matchup, and this is probably the biggest one, from the casual fan standpoint of the weekend, and that's Georgia going to Tennessee. Georgia coming off the huge win, looked great against Ole Miss. Obviously, the committee moved them up to number 1. I don't disagree that when they play like that, and like we all know, and you and I had this conversation, like that's their ceiling. They absolutely, on any given week, can look like the best team in the country, hands down. They looked like a buzzsaw last week. But the problem is they haven't done it consistently. So, numbers like ours generally aren't going to be as favorable as what the committee was. Kelly, I'll let you do the honors here and go through your numbers here on this game first.
Yeah, Tyler, you said, the casual fan this week, this is probably the game they're looking at the most. I honestly feel like some people have turned their attention away from this game because Georgia's already clinched the East, and Tennessee got, run off the field last week against Missouri. But this game, it's got a watchability score of 9.6 for me. It's my number 1 game of the week, number 12 game of the entire regular season by this metric. I'm very interested in this one, and my numbers are projecting it to be closer than Vegas. I have Georgia minus 6.5 in this game. It's a 68% win expectancy for the Dogs. Tyler, you said it. It's safe to say this Georgia offense has hit its stride. The unit's currently ranked a season best number 5 nationally. The defense has been great all year. It's ranked number 5 again this week. Put those 2 top 5 units together, and Georgia is back in the top 4 of my power ratings for the first time in over a month. As a reminder, Georgia started the year number 1 in the power ratings. They kind of sleptwalked, played with their food, whatever you want to say, through the first third or even half of the schedule. They fell to as low as number 10 in the power ratings. And the way they were playing, I didn't have a huge issue with it. Some people did. And I said, like what you said, Tyler, look at how they're playing right now. And it's not great. We know they have that extra gear. We've seen it each of the past 2 years. We think this team this year is capable of it. We just haven't seen it yet. Well, yet has come because we saw it this past week. And as they do every year around this time of year, it seems, the Dogs have found that next gear. They're putting it all together down the stretch. They present the biggest test on both sides of the ball that Tennessee will face all season based on my current numbers. For Tennessee, listen, we all know that the 2023 Tennessee team is not as good as the 2022 Tennessee team, but that in and of itself is okay because the 2022 Tennessee team was remarkable. It was the best team that we've seen in Knoxville by my historical numbers since 1998 when Tennessee won a national championship, the first year of the BCS era. So I still think, and the model still thinks, that Tennessee is a good football team. That's despite, let's call it what it was, a disastrous game in Columbia last week. The offense, yes, has taken a step back from last year, but it still ranks at the top 20 nationally. The defense actually slightly better than I thought it was going to be coming into the year, than the model thought it would be. It's ranking now in the top 25 in the country. Also, and this isn't captured by the model, which makes me even feel a little bit stronger about where the model is. Tyler, I feel like some of the intangibles here favor Tennessee as well. In most cases, there are exceptions to everything, but in most cases, we see a bounce back from a team that just got blown out. Tennessee last week at Missouri, they got blown out. Like, we typically see a bit of a progression there to the mean. And at the same time, we typically see a potential letdown from a team that just blew out a team. Georgia last week against a then CFP top 10 ranked Ole Miss team. You said it. They were firing on all cylinders. They were clicking. Like, that was their ceiling. And after a team plays to their ceiling, they don't just fall off a cliff the next week, but we typically see them take a half step back and kind of regress a little bit to the mean that they'd played at previously. So those things I think are in Tennessee's favor here that the model's not necessarily capturing. Not to mention, this is a revenge game for the Vols. The fans in Knoxville would like nothing more than to knock off this freshly minted number 1 team in the country. Just like Georgia did to Tennessee in Athens last year, if you remember. Tennessee was the number 1 team in the initial, I want to say, CFP ranking. So this game happened a little bit earlier last year than it is this year. So ultimately, even though I do think this game's going to be closer than Vegas, and my numbers give the advantage to Georgia on both sides of the ball, despite having to go to a hostile environment here, I still have Georgia minus 6.5. It's a 68% chance to win the game outright. I have a 34% chance, Tyler, that Georgia finishes the year 13-0. So they win these next 2 and beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. 34% chance that happens by my numbers right now.
Wow. Yeah. So we're pretty much in lockstep here. So I've got Georgia power rated number 6. The resume is number 5. I've got Tennessee power rated number 20, resume number 28. The Georgia offense, I'm not quite as high on them as your numbers, Kelly. I've got them number 12 in the country. And again, a lot of that is just, I mean, earlier in the year, they just were not doing what they've done here recently. I mean, even scoring, what they scored 30 on Missouri a couple weeks ago. I mean, that was a solid offensive performance. Then obviously last week they went crazy. So my number's a little slower to react to that. So I've got Georgia's offense number 12. I've got the defense number 8. So still a top 10 unit. Tennessee offensively, I did a double take. I've got the Tennessee offense number 33 and the Tennessee defense number 21. I'm like, when's the last time the Tennessee defense was, higher than the offense? You just don't think of Tennessee that way casually. So
you don't think of Heupel that way.
Nugget. Yeah, exactly. So, interesting nugget there that I, kind of unearthed as I was putting my numbers together for this. So I project Georgia minus 7. So we're right there in the same ballpark. Line currently sitting Georgia -10 with an over-under of 58.5. I actually project this total at just 50.5. Again, a lot of that has to do with me being lower probably on the Georgia offense. So even if you want to give them a couple point bump, I think I like the under here in this game. So I'm probably going to look at that from a betting perspective this week. But yeah, you mentioned it, Kelly. I think situationally, this is a great spot for Tennessee. I mentioned, I think on our last week's show, where you want to look at what teams have done, the week before, and Georgia was at a crazy high and Tennessee was at a crazy low. Generally, you do see that regression back to the mean. So I think we are getting a bit of an inflated number here with double digits here with Georgia. Again, you mentioned it. They're the newly minted number 1 team in the country. They're going to get a public boost from that. I took a quick peek. The VSiN betting splits again here on this game. 87% of the bets, 91% of the money on Georgia. Literally nobody's betting Tennessee in this game, which, again, doesn't necessarily mean anything. But generally, when you see that type of lopsided action.
That's at -10,
yes.
All that money?
Well, it doesn't necessarily break it down, but
currently,
and actually DraftKings actually now has moved to 10.5. So yeah,
Man.
So that's crazy. Pretty lopsided action here, driving this line up. So I'm going to be taking a hard look at Tennessee and the under here.
People have to just be like you said at the top, and like I reiterated, people have to just be saying to heck with the models and what we typically look at when we're betting a game. Georgia has just they've reached that level. Like they're now in cruise control on that level, which I don't blame you for thinking that after watching last week's game, but I personally would like to see it for maybe one more time before we just go ahead and say, yep, absolutely, that's it. They can do it. We just saw it. But man, people are just saying, I mean, that's my only explanation here is people are just saying, yep, Georgia's they're in beast mode now and it's time to actually play. They are focused on winning a 3rd straight national championship for the first time since Minnesota did it in the 30s. I was thinking of 1930s, I should say. I was thinking about that. Like, if you're Brock Bowers or anybody in his recruiting class, if you're a junior on that team, you don't know what it's like to not win a national championship. Like, dude, and I know crazy. I'm like late to this realization. Like, people are like, yeah, Kelly, duh, they're the 2-time defending national champs. That's what that means. But like, think about that. There is a significant portion of this team who has not ended a season at Georgia without hoisting a national championship trophy. Like, wow. And now they've hit the point where like, yo, if we want to do it again, we better start acting like it. And they came out against Ole Miss and acted like it. So it's just it's mind-boggling to me. And again, I know it's like, yeah, Kelly, duh, that's what it means. But just stop and think about that. Crazy.
I do wonder too, though. That's a good point. I do wonder how that team is gonna handle some adversity if and when it comes, though, because like when all you've done is win, you don't really know how to lose. I'm curious. I'm not saying they can't. They absolutely can and probably will overcome adversity. But I'm curious when that does strike. I was just looking. I mean, I've got Tennessee, Missouri literally power rated right next to each other, and Georgia just beat Missouri by 9 at home. So, and that was just 2 weeks ago. So it's not like yes, the Ole Miss performance was excellent. Ole Miss is a team that I've been on record on this show throughout the year saying I think the numbers are too high on Ole Miss. Like my numbers have been high on them, and I've said that makes me uncomfortable. I don't think Ole Miss is as good as their metrics. Conversely, Georgia's probably a little bit better than their metrics. So you saw how that played out. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Georgia steamrolls Tennessee. I think it's going to be a closer game than people expect. That's going to bring us to our third and final marquee matchup of the week. And we're going to go to the G5, to the AAC, where we've got some conference title implications that I'm going to let Kelly explain because it's like that meme of the guy with all the charts and everything, and he's explaining it. That's what it's like trying to figure out who's going to make the American Conference Championship. So Kelly, I'll kick us off with the basic numbers, and then you can get into the conference title implications here because it's a tangled web. But I've got SMU number 13. No surprise there. My number's been really high on them all season. I've talked about that. That's a team that I've said that it makes me uncomfortable how high I've got them rated, but also like they continue to cover numbers. So like maybe my model is kind of ahead of the curve here on SMU. Memphis, I've got power rated number 46, mostly because their defense has completely gone MIA, which if you're an Ohio State fan, you know who their defensive coordinator is, Matt Barnes. So it's not all that much of a surprise. I've got the SMU offense number 15 in the country. Their defense is number 22. The Memphis offense, great. It's number 17 in the country. The defense, Kelly, number 108 in the country. I mean, they've just been giving up like 40 and 50 points to literally anybody that wants to show up and score. So not great for the Memphis defense. I don't think they're going to have a whole lot here for the SMU offense. I project this game minus 10, SMU minus 10 on the road here. The line currently sitting SMU minus 8. So I actually still show some value on SMU here. The total 65.5. That's really high. I project 59.5, but I'll be honest, I would not feel comfortable taking a game under here just because the Memphis defense is so bad. I think if I was going to make a play here on the total based on my numbers, I think I would maybe play the Memphis team total under or the SMU team total over. Probably would be the best, my best bet of this game.
I'll start with the conference championship leverage or standings that we talked about. And Tyler, I will say, while there's some intrigue here and a little bit of math to be done, you want to talk about that GIF or meme of the guy who's on the chalkboard doing all this stuff. That's the Big 12. You go look at the Big 12 and try to figure out those scenarios. Now, they did clarify a couple of things here recently with the head-to-head and how that benefits Oklahoma State. That helps a little bit, but that's the one where you're on the chalkboard and you're talking about this and that, and you got all the hands moving and everything. This one, there's some things to talk about, but it's a little bit more straightforward. So what we've got in the AAC right now, 3 teams, SMU, Tulane, UTSA, all 6-0, undefeated in conference play. It's pretty remarkable this late in the year to have 3 undefeateds. Memphis is the only other team that still has a shot to make this conference championship game. They are 5-1 in conference play. If Memphis loses this game, they are out of the mix. They have no more chance to make it. Conversely, then, if SMU wins this game, they're not a surefire lock, I don't think, based on the tiebreakers, but my numbers would give them like a 97% chance to make it. I mean, they're a virtual lock with a win in this game. And the reason for that is Tulane and UTSA, they play each other next week. So it's impossible we're going to end with 3 undefeated teams. It is possible, or you could even argue likely, that we'll end with 2 undefeated teams. In that case, it's very, very simple as to which 2 teams make it. Now you've got to do the figuring out who's going to host this game. Because that's another thing here with the American is it's not a neutral site championship game. The team with the best conference record, or if tied, the team who ends up number 1 in the conference standings, they're going to host this game. And so if we get the other result, though, that's what makes it more interesting and more of a muddied mess. Because then SMU and Memphis would both be 6-1. Tulane and UTSA have to play a game this week, of course, but if they both win, they're both undefeated going into next week, which means the winner there is guaranteed to make it, but then the loser would only have 1 loss. So now, do you end up with just 1 team with 1 loss? Do you have 2? Do you have all 3? And then that's where you could get some of that math going from that GIF and that meme. But and again, some of these tiebreakers now are more complicated in the world of expanded and larger conferences where you can't play everybody, and in the world that we've moved away from divisions for almost everybody, and I believe everybody next year. I haven't seen anything from the Sun Belt or the MAC. Those would be the only 2 in 2024 that maybe are still using divisions. I don't know. We know the Big Ten and the SEC are moving away from it next year, and those are the only 4 that still use them. Bigger conferences without divisions means not everybody plays everybody, which means the tiebreakers get more complex and more diluted. So that's setting the stage for that. What do my numbers think about the actual game? You said the Vegas line is SMU minus 8. Well, my line is SMU minus 8. Both offenses here are the better units. Again, Tyler, that might explain why we've got the high over under total set here. I agree with you. My numbers have Memphis. I think you said you have number 108. I have Memphis D number 109. It's the worst they've been. Wow. It's the worst they've been ranked all year on that side of the ball. The good news for them, Memphis Tigers, their offense is number 23. That's the best they've been ranked all year. So you talk about teams that have a really good strength on one side. I mean, this is a top 25 offense. I'm adjusting for opponent. This isn't like they play in the G5. No, like this is an opponent adjusted. It's a top 25 unit on the offensive side. It's a bottom 25 unit on the defensive side. That's a big, big swing. I mean, you're talking like Iowa numbers here, dang near, in terms of the discrepancy between the 2 units. For SMU, They are stronger on offense. I have them number 26, but the defense is also pretty darn good. I have them right now at a season best number 35. So SMU, I give them the advantage on both sides of I give them a very large advantage when their offense is on the field. I do give Memphis a slight advantage with their offense, but that one's much closer to a wash. This game is at Memphis, so take that for what it's worth here. SMU knows what's on the line with a win here, almost assuredly going to be in the AAC championship game. They've got Navy at home next week. But Memphis knows, too, they have to win to keep their hopes alive. And they'll be licking their chops for next week. They have to go to Temple. Temple's power rated number 129 in my number. So they're thinking, hey, if we win this one, we really like our chances to get to 7-1, and we'd have the head-to-head tiebreak over SMU. So there's a lot on the line this week in Memphis. My number's like SMU -8, which is right where Vegas is, as you said. But, yeah, it's big implications from a conference championship game perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And SMU, like, I find myself, I don't know if you do this, probably not because you're a sane human being, but I find myself like these teams that my numbers have like kind of latched onto and been somewhat ahead of the curve on, like SMU, like I find myself rooting for them, like just for my numbers to check out and me not to be a crazy person. So, like Oklahoma,
totally.
Obviously that collapsed on itself. Oklahoma's still high. My numbers, I'm getting yelled at on Twitter and having to mute people, but it's fine. All right, so that's going to do it for our marquee matchups. Again, not a huge slate of marquee games this week, but enough good football that, it's going to get us through. It's going to be a fun Saturday, and next week's going to be crazy. Let's hit some rapid fires here, just some projections so people know where our numbers stand on some of these games in case they're looking at it from a betting perspective or just to frame expectations. So let's start off with USC hosting UCLA. Line currently 6.5 with an over-under 65.5. I'm right in line with the market. I project USC -6.5 with an over-under of 57. So again, my numbers are kind of on the under here, but USC is another team like Memphis that like, can you really bet a game under? I think maybe the USC team total under would be the play here. UCLA can kind of muck up a game. So I think if any team's going to go under in this, it would be USC. I don't see UCLA going under their team total here.
My numbers have USC -10 in this game, Tyler. So I actually like the Trojans a little bit more than your numbers and the market. But what I have to say about this game is it's one of my favorite jersey games every single year. I'm certainly hoping that USC is wearing their red and UCLA is wearing their blue, because there's just something about that jersey combo out in Los Angeles. It's absolutely beautiful. And I certainly hope that's what we get. This is one of my favorite games in college football. And I'm from the Midwest, right? Like, I don't like either of these teams necessarily. I do have an affinity for the Rose Bowl, which of course has lost its meaning here as we've gone into the expanded playoff mode. But seeing these two teams, especially USC and the Rose Bowl against a Big Ten team, frequently, maybe that's where it stems from. I don't know. I just love these jerseys. I love the colors. I love the rivalry, and it's Los Angeles, so it's hard to hate on it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this game. It's probably not the highest quality matchup we've ever had between these two teams, but it's going to be exciting nonetheless.
Real quick, Ohio State, Michigan both wearing the home uniforms. What do you think? I say yes.
Yes. Had to think about it.
I think it would be awesome. All right, moving on. Speaking of Ohio State, that's our next rapid fire. Ohio State hosting Minnesota. Big look ahead spot here for the Buckeyes. Ohio State currently a 27.5 point favorite with an over under of 50. I project Ohio State -28, so I'm right in line with the market. This actually earlier in the week was Ohio State -28.5. I've seen some Minnesota money come in, knock that down under the key of 28. And I project the total at 48.5. So not a ton of value here, but if I were to make a lean, I would probably take Minnesota in the points and the under.
Ohio State -28.5 for me, Tyler, right where it opened, apparently. But we're all right in line with each other here. 98% chance Ohio State wins this game. Somebody was talking to me about, hey, is this a potential college football playoff chaos game? No, it's not. Like, did you guys watch Minnesota last week against Purdue? Like, no, it's not. Ohio State's going to win. Are they going to cover? I don't know. It's a big number, and we'll see. But I think Ohio State knows they're number 2 now. And so that's a chip on their shoulder, and they got to continue. They have to impress. They have to do everything they can. And they know that Michigan's ready and watching. So I don't think Ohio State's going to show all their cards in terms of like play calling, but I do think they're going to do everything they can to win by as many points as they can. Absolutely. So we'll see. Ohio State minus 28.5.
Yeah, listen to Friday's Buckeye Talk. I'll have some Ohio State bets if you're interested in that. I'll have some prop bets and things like that. Next rapid fire, Texas Tech hosting UCF. Both these teams coming off big wins last week. Texas Tech beating Kansas. UCF beat the crap out of Oklahoma State. I was actually on both of those teams, so those were two of my better bets of last week in a sea of bad bets. Those two came through for me. Texas Tech currently a 2.5-point favorite. I project them as a half-point favorite. Over under currently sitting at 60, and I projected at 54.5.
Texas Tech -2. Yeah, last week, Tyler, I had it as a pick 'em with UCF and Oklahoma State, which means I was on UCF against the spread. Certainly didn't see the outcome that we got coming. But yeah, in this game, Texas Tech -2. I've said this over and over. Texas Tech's had a disappointing year. They're number 107 on my over-under achiever list, so like near the bottom of that in terms of win-loss record relative to expected. Their power rating, though, is really not that much worse than it was to start the year. This is a team that I would say has been pretty significantly unlucky. And again, I'm not making excuses. I'm not a Texas Tech fan. Like, it's just the reality is this is still a really good football team with a mediocre record. So Texas Tech -2 for me in this one at home.
I'm looking forward to next week, Texas Tech and Texas. That's going to be a fun one to talk about and talk about some potential chaos. We'll see.
If it was in Lubbock, Tyler, that would really be chaos. It's in Austin.
Oh yeah, yeah. Clemson hosting North Carolina. Clemson a 7-point favorite with an over under of 58.5. I project Clemson -4 with a total of 56.
Man, we're in lockstep. I got Clemson -4.5 in this game. Not a good year for the Tigers. They're in the bottom 10 of my over-under achievers. North Carolina still in the mix here for a spot in the ACC championship game. They need some help, but they know they have to win in this one to give themselves any chance. It's going to be an interesting game. I'm looking forward to this one, and you could say, well, it's not nearly the game we thought it was going to be in the preseason with what potential implications it could have on the conference championship game. And you're right. There's no getting around that. Still two pretty good power rated teams with something on the line for North Carolina in that regard. So Clemson -4.5.
Next up, Arizona hosting Utah. Arizona a 1-point home favorite with a total of 44.5. I project Arizona -2 with a total of 40.5.
I've got Arizona. I've got Utah -2.5 in this game. It's a 58% win expectancy for the Utes. I have Utah still power rated number 21. Arizona's number 31. Arizona's having a great year. They've been upgraded by the model. They're the number 8 biggest upgrades of any team in FBS this year from preseason to current. Only 7 teams have been upgraded more than them. But Utah at 7-3, Cam Rising hasn't played it down. Their fans have to be very happy as well. This is an interesting game. I really don't know what to make of it. I don't trust the model a ton on this one just because Arizona's like a totally new team. Utah is kind of a grab bag. Their record's really good, but their performances are still kind of, I don't know what you're going to get. They've lost 2 out of 3. Sandwiched in between there was a 55-3 win against a bad Arizona State team. So again, what are you going to get? I don't know. The numbers say Utah -2.5.
Yeah, I want nothing to do with this game from a betting standpoint for sure. And then our last rapid fire, we threw this one on here last second in wake of the news that the James Madison bowl eligibility waiver or conference championship waiver was denied. They will not be playing in the Sun Belt Championship, but they are hosting College Gameday this week, and they are hosting App State. Currently, the line James Madison -10 with an over under of 55.5. My number's pretty much in line with the market here. I'm James Madison -11 with a total of 54.5.
James Madison -10 for me. This feels like a little bit of a changing of the guard type of game. When you think about, FCS teams or at the time Division I AA teams that make a transition and have some success at the FBS level, like App State, that's the team that kind of comes to mind for me. And I think probably for most people, and it starts with the 2007 upset at Michigan, but it's carried forward since then and they've had success at the FBS level. James Madison has made this transition from FCS to FBS look like way too easy. Like, I don't think any team's ever made a transition to the top level of college football since we've had college football. that has been like, oh yeah, we just stepped up a weight class and we're good. Like, don't worry about us. Crazy how good James Madison has been. I have them power rated number 38 this week, most deserving ranked. I know the committee doesn't rank them because they're not eligible. I completely understand that. My rankings aren't for anything eligibility related, so I have them number 12 in my most deserving. Tyler, I know you have them in the top 10. James Madison, a great story, a fun ride, and starting next year, they're out of their transition window, and I very much look forward to seeing what the Dukes can do in the Sun Belt moving forward.
Yeah, you know what? Just give me a G5 4-team playoff this year with like James Madison, SMU, Tulane, and whatever fourth wild card you want to throw in there. And I am down. That would be awesome.
Dude, so if we look at like the most deserving rankings for me, I've got 3 G5s in my top 30. Let me see. And SMU's the one hanging out right outside of it. I'd have James Madison in there. How about Liberty? I mean, they're still undefeated.
Yeah,
I know
Liberty,
we say they
yeah.
haven't played anybody. Like I know, I get it, but I got them number 21 and the most deserving. Tulane's number 26 for me, and then SMU comes in at 34. Troy, they're hanging out at number 36. Toledo is number 37 for me.
I was going to say Toledo. Yeah,
I'm G5. They could have their own fun little playoff like that. People have advocated for that. I don't want to like cut them out from the quote unquote FBS, like big boys. But if we're being really honest with ourselves, is Miami of Ohio playing the same game as the University of Miami, the U? Like, are they playing the same game?
Maybe.
With the same resources? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
to me,
no, I agree.
I'm with
it.
A breakaway wouldn't be the worst thing. But I can understand our hesitation to make that happen. I'm not advocating for it. I'm saying we could have a really fun and exciting G5 playoff if it was its own kind of standalone entity.
Yeah. I mean, if they want to just do it unsanctioned, I don't even care. Just somebody live stream it on Facebook and I'll watch it.
Awesome.
All right. We're out. We're officially off the rails. That's going to do it for our Week 12 preview. We'll be back. Next week is Thanksgiving, so I don't want to make a promise as to when we'll be back. Kelly and I will discuss, but we will be back next week at some point to recap Week 12, look ahead to Week 13, rivalry week, which is always hard for me to say. Can't wait. A lot of good games next weekend, so let's enjoy this one. It's going to be fun. We've only got a couple left, but until next time, for Kelley Ford, I'm Tyler Shoemaker, and that was Calculated Risk.